Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Send a coded message for Starfleet Commander, Priority 1. Federation science vessel Grissom arriving, Genesis planet, Mutara sector to begin research. JTS to Bond Commanding.
Aye, sir. Coding now.
Well, good morning. Hello, welcome back. It is week 4 on the big, what I'm calling the big old Grissom project. And we've got one last bit of construction or modifying or remodifying to do before we can start putting some paint down and finishing up the wiring. And I'm gonna file this one under well-intentioned but still wrong. The maker of this kit, Larson Designs, they did one thing that I'm sure was well-intentioned, but it's wrong, and it needs to be fixed. And that is this detail on the front and back, or the leading edge and the trailing edge of the main deck. These recesses here should not be recesses. This was on the filming model, this was flat as the day is long, and then these boxes were simply painted in. They were black boxes on this. This is like a light blue accent, but these black boxes here should not be recessed. They should be merely painted on. So what I've done is I've taken some strip stock that is 0.03 by 0.125, and I'm just filling them in. I've got glued in here. It's gonna be, well, it was better off doing this than trying to just fill it with Bondo, because I can fill this in, that takes up the majority of it, sand it flush, and then just put a light coat of the spot putty over top of that. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm just finishing these up. It's as simple as this. You take a strip, you lay it down, you mark it off, because it's the better to do this than to try to measure it and think you are going to get an accurate measurement. It's best to just mark it in place, trim it out, glue it down, sand it around it, and then move on to the next one. So I've got the front half of this side done. I've got this side to do, and then I've got some pieces in the back. Now this mistaken detail also happens on the front of the pylons, but I have already done those in putty, so those have been taken care of. So let me just finish up filling in these, and then I can put this aside and get back to the pontoon, because I want to do the wiring's mostly done in the pontoon, but I want to go ahead and put the wire up the pylon so that I can close those up. Alrighty, I've got the filler pieces in, and I've slathered on a generous coat of the spot putty to fill in the cracks. Now the only thing to do is to let that all cure for a few hours, perhaps even overnight, and then come back and sand it flush. So while this is doing that, I can be working on the lights for the impulse deck. This is the underside of this flat deck, so I can put on the impulse lights, and I can also put on the lower dome lights. Okay, as you can tell, hopefully by this set of sloppy wiring, that I've got the impulse deck now glued down, and I'm chasing the two different bits of wiring that I need up this narrow channel to the front of the ship. I have widened out the hole here, or the channel here, to allow for where the resistors ended up landing. And what I'm going to do is kind of just fill this channel in then with some of this UV glue, hit it in a spot, and then cover it over with epoxy sculpt. But I am working my way ever so gingerly up the spine here, and the next piece to go on will be this one, and then the two snow speeder guns will go here and here, and then the next thing will be the dome up front here. Alrighty, with the wiring done and glued down, I am now filling back in with the some of this strip stock, and now you can see why I was making all the great pains to make sure that this channel was completely straight, because it's so much easier to fill back in with strip stock. if you don't have to bend it around. Now you can still see all the areas there where I've got big old gaps where I had gone off track or had to widen it out for wiring joints, but certainly better than having to close the whole thing in with putty when you can cover up some of it at least with the strip stock. So going to continue that, and then these guys get glued down, and that will bring us up to the small dome on front. Well, I think that's a goodly amount to get done today. I don't know if I'm going to come back to this or not. I'm still working on a big order for Steve, but all of this wiring here has been buried. I've got these modules glued down. I'm going to wait till I can sand that before I put the snow speeder guns in. I've got the front dome glued down. It's drying up with a bunch of epoxy as well. And for any of you out there who had one day on your bingo card for how long it's going to take Lou to mess up one of his new shirts, you are the winner. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the back, because yes, it only took me one day to get some crap on my new shirt. It is the two-part JB weld, so not only is it, you know, a stain, but it's one that's going to linger. But that's why I got these shirts, was so I could, not so that they would be sacrificial, but so that I could get stuff on them and not mess up any of my so-called good shirts. So there you go. It is fulfilling its destiny, and that's all we can ask of anybody. We're going to let that sit and dry and cure and all that, because JB Weld takes longer to cure than any other adhesive I have, but the upside of it is it also self-levels, so all of that stuff will hopefully smooth itself out. I can show what this looks like a bit. I've got the inside of the dome masked off with some clear tape, so you only see the line of windows. And let's see if I can find what the strobe light would look like. There you go, that's what the strobe light would look like. And then over here, these are all resisted, so I can use the 9-volt battery. And that shows what the impulse light looks like and how much light blocking I need to do. And then this shows the red and green on the bottom. So there you go. Both of those marker lights are done. Hello, welcome back. It's Tuesday, and we're going to do some more wire channeling today. Hopefully this will be the last of the wire channeling, but I'm not exactly sure because, you know, it's like sculpture. It's a work in progress. I've got it mapped out to what I think needs to happen, and we'll see if that's actually what's going to end up being the case. Originally, I had thought I could run everything down one side of the pylon, and then I realized how impractical that was going to be. Not impossible, but impractical, because I would rather make two narrow channels than one really thick channel, because if you make it too thick or too deep, you risk cutting through to the other side, which is not on anybody's list of favorite things. So I figured while I was here, I would go ahead and just divvy up the work between the two pylons. On what is going to be the port pylon, I need to run two lines that will feed the port. Let's get up here. That will feed the port nacelle. There is a strobe circuit and a 9-volt circuit that needs to come up here. That's going to chase from the base here up this pylon, will be covered over by this plate for a majority of it. It will exit through the top here, and then when I set the plate down, the big deck plate down, there's a hole in the deck plate right above that. That will come up and feed the two lights for the port nacelle, the strobe at the back and the green light or the red light at the front. So that's going to be where those two wires go, and that's going to be a fairly easy thing to channel out, I'm hoping, using the 28 gauge. Sorry, I thought it was 30. 28 gauge wire that I got from Evans Lighting. I'll need to run 2 strands. The most important thing I'll have to remember about this is to put a note on them or put a piece of tape on them so that I know which circuit is which, since they are both the same wiring but have different voltage requirements. One's a 9 volt unresisted, and one is a resisted line, so I need to make sure that I don't accidentally put 9 volts of juice straight into an unresisted line. That's a horrible thing to have happen to a nice Starship. So those 2 lines will come up here. I'm going to leave about 4 inches, I guess, of spare wire out of the top so that I can trim that down once I've got the deck plate on. My goal is to get all of this done and closed back over with the epoxy sculpt so that I can paint. I'm going to have to paint the inside of this area and probably a good chunk of the deck here. And then I'm also going to have to paint the underside of that deck before I put the 2 things together, because once they're together, it's going to be nigh on impossible to get an airbrush to spray up into there. Now, there will be areas that I can get to, and I will still have to touch some stuff up, but I'm going to make it as easy on myself as I can, because I'm a lazy slob and want to be able to paint this area while I can still get to it out in the open air. Then I will put the deck down, screw it together, and then use those wires to complete the wiring that goes to the nacelles and to the top saucer. So I've got 2 lines coming out of this one, and I've got 3 lines coming out of this one. Originally I was going to have all 5 coming out of one, and then realized that was just madness. The 3 that have to come out, 3, sir. The 3 that have to come out of here, the counting shall be 3. When the 3 wires that come out, or 3 sets of wires that come out of here, one is for the strobe for this starboard engine, and the green light for the front of the starboard engine. That's a 9 volt line. And then I'm going to carry that 9 volt line. I'm going to junction it on top of the deck and run it to the constant on lights that are in the saucer, which is the green and red nav lights and the window lights. All that happens from that same 9 volt source. But there is a second strobe line that I need to send up. One strobe line will do the strobe at the back of the engine. The other strobe line handles the 2 strobes that are in the saucer. And yeah, I could probably put them all on the same strobe line, but I don't want to, because Elliot has gone through such strains to separate out the different LEDs on the different strobe circuits, so that I think if I put them all on one, it would just be overloading. I'll go ahead and siphon 2 of them off like he's got here. I've got 2 left remaining on the board. I will snip those and join the wiring together, and that's what's going to go up and power the strobes on the top and the bottom of the saucer. Again, the important thing is to make sure that those wires are clearly identified from each other, so that I know where, once I've closed the whole pylons up and I've got just bare wires sticking out, that I know which one is which. So let's start cutting. This is the 9 volt circuit. This is the straight 9 volt. I need to figure out where this battery is going to live. It's probably going to live up here, and where the switch is going to be. And this is the circuit board for the strobes. I think what I first want to do is take this circuit board, strip the wires off of what I need, and add the additional wiring that I'm going to need to run up to the top deck. And then I want to secure that strobe board down so that it doesn't, it's protected. Okay, I've got the wires mapped out here on the pylons. Now, gluing them down is going to be a long and tedious process that I don't need to subject you to, but I hope you can see. And now, while they're at their cleanest, what this is going to look like. You can see I've got one line going up here. Well, maybe you can't. Let me get the camera in closer. You can see one set of 2 wires going up and down and into there. And then here you can see 3 sets of wires that I'll need to glue down. And then I will designate, once I have stripped the ends of these, I can designate which wire up at this end is going to be which. Yes, they are way longer than they need to be, but that's one thing I've learned from watching home improvement shows. When the electricians wire a house, they pull down more wire than they need because you can always cut it off, but you can't stretch it once it's in. Alright, the wiring is glued down. It is. I used the fancy schmancy UV glue because I was able to position it and then hit it with the light. It's sort of like delayed action CA, because once you put CA down, it's already starting to cure. But you can put the UV glue down, sink your wire into a bed of it, and then hit it with the light, and it will cure then, which is quite a nice time savings. So last thing to do is to clean up these exposed wires. I need to sand a little bit off of these filler pieces that go over top so that they will sit level, and you'll never see that really once the time it's painted. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of the JB Weld over top of that. It's a stronger glue, stronger surface. It takes longer for it to set up, but it is a stronger finish than using epoxy sculpt, because that can get accidentally sanded away, whereas JB Weld's tougher to sand through. And this is really, some of these wires are sitting on the surface, so they're not going to get sanded much at all. And then we'll be ready to hit it with a primer coat of paint, and we'll be finally starting to paint. Alright, so I've just laid in some JB Weld over top of the wiring here. That's going to cure overnight. I ain't going to touch that for the rest of the day. I am, however, going to do this side and bury that piece. You see I've got this piece in here now, and we'll do the same. We'll flip it around, do the same on that side, and then carefully put it where I cannot muck it up any further. Alrighty, it's late afternoon, and these have had a chance to at least start to set up, and we can get a better glimpse of what it is we're working with. It's spongy enough that I could still work with it and kind of push it down, clean it off of some parts, but it is stiff enough that it's going to stay where you put it. And what I want to do at this point is to move this off the table and get the warp nacelles out. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back, because one thing I can do tonight and let this be curing overnight is, now that this is all more or less done here, I can put this down in place where it's going to go. It's going to cover up all of that messiness there. I can put that down, put this wire in place, and I can glue this entire panel down, because I no longer need to get into it for any reason. So welcome to Rubber Band Central. Say that 5 times fast. The nice thing about the Grissom's shape is it makes it really easy to slip rubber bands over here. And I've got a layer of the JB Weld between the top and bottom, splooshed that down onto the top of it, banded it all up, which will help self-center it, a couple of clamps at the back, and one rubber band at the front here, not the frontier, the front here, and we are good to go. We're going to let that cure up overnight. This part is still removable because of the cleverly placed magnets, and that's great. That's where we're going to let that sit for the rest of the night. Okay, so what I'd like to do is revisit the top deck here for a second before I start on the engine work. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've sanded off the high spots from yesterday where I had put these filler strips in and then put a nice smear of Bondo over top of it. Well, I've sanded those down and I need to go back and put another thinner coat of Bondo. But to do that, I had to go out and get a new tube because you get down to the bottom of a tube of Bondo and it is disproportionately the thick stuff and not the creamy, whipped up, really nice, smooth putty that you're looking for. So I'm going to put a nice smooth coat of putty around these areas again, and then we'll put it aside to dry overnight. Morning, everybody. It's Wednesday. Time for another day of Grissom fun. Oh, birth fun here. I have taken the rubber bands off of, and all this is in the other room, of course, and you can't see it. Taking the rubber bands off of the pontoon from yesterday. That all of that resin or the JB Weld has set up beautifully. I'm ready to start sanding that seam, maybe get some paint on it. There's one last thing I need to do to this top deck. I keep saying that, but yet I keep discovering one last things to do. Now that I know how my wiring is going to go and how the engines are going to relate to it, I need to further open up this area here and on the same one on the other side, obviously, for where the wiring is going to make its connections. And that's one last thing I can do before I put a coat of paint on this, which I am ready to do. So I've got the bit in the Dremel with the router cover on. I got to take this outside because it's going to spit up an unholy amount of resin, flakes, and dust. So best to do that outside. I've got the first coat of primer on the nacelles. I did that this morning, seeing where some defects are rearing their ugly heads and some things that need sanded, but that's what primer does. And I'm ready to see. This is where I'm running into that problem. See, now I know where my wiring is going to go. I have to notch out for these connections, and then when it goes down on the deck, actually it goes down on the deck this way, I need to enlarge the area where it meets the deck, so it's going to sit something like that. So here you can see the top of the bottom of the underside of the top deck. It's all very confusing. This is the bottom of the decks, but you'll see it underneath. Got the first coat of primer on it. I've got the snow speeder guns on it now. I've also got masks over the two running lights and the strobe up here, and the windows are still masked. I've done one coat of sanding to see where there are still some irregular bits of the Bondo, and I'm just going around here and doing a little touchy touches. And the next step is to put another coat of primer on it that covers over all of this. This joint looks drier because it's a different material. It looks a little bit lighter because it's a different material from the resin, so it dries differently. But this is ready for another coat, and then we'll flip it over and do the top of the top deck. You know, I can never adequately express how great a model looks when you have hit it with the first coat of primer. It just evens out all of the colors and all of the sanding that you've done, all of the little spot puttying. It evens everything out and can restore your faith in a kit that maybe isn't that stellar to start with. Now, I have already put the putty over some of the worst spots that the primer revealed, but again, as I've always said, that's primer's job. It's there to show you your weaknesses and to show you where your work should be concentrated on as far as cleaning stuff up. And I've come away actually in a little bit better shape than I thought. Some of these joints that I thought were really rough in the abstract or in the raw were actually pretty good once I got the primer on it. So I'm just tucking some wires in here to see. Yeah, that'll fit tight once the wires are all tucked in. But this joint, these joints here, actually came out in much better shape than I was dreading. So that's good. We're going to let that cure. It's time for a lunch break. I don't know what lunch will be today, but it will be something, I'm sure. And we'll come back to this afternoon. Just doing a little bit of no muss, no fuss, actual putting two parts together and building stuff. It's time to put this last detail on the top of the top deck. And I've got the base here all squared up. Now I know that I don't know what kit it came from, but this looks very much like a turret or something off of a tank that was one piece. And it's got these what look like wheels sunk into them. And there's no lights in here. There's no, like I said, no muss, no fuss. You're just building up the parts. So I'm just throwing some CA at it, sinking the other parts into it. There you go. All done. Lovely. Now I can put a little bit more primer over that. But as I said before, see, the primer shows you all your sins, but it also can help you feel better about a lot of things too. So I've also got this part cut out, all of this wiring that goes up into the front. Were I a mind to do it, I really could glue this piece down. I have done a fair amount of pondering, and for me pondering means looking at something, stepping away from it, walk away, come back, check it again, and then walk away a second time and then come back a third and see if I still think the idea is a good one, because I hate to do things impulsively. That's a lie. I do things impulsively all day long. I figured out I can go ahead and glue this down to the deck, and the only stopping point is that I need to be able to fish 3 sets of wires through this channel, because the wires that are coming up from the pontoon will all feed into this way, and here's where all of my master joinery is going to happen. So that has to be accessible. But the reason that is the best reason I could think of to glue it down was the joint here where the saucer meets the front of the deck. That needs to be dressed up and filleted in and puttied and all of that, because it does not meet the deck exactly. There are some dips in it. So I want to go ahead and glue that in, and then I could be filling that in with putties and whatnot before I put either the engines or the top of the saucer down. So I am going to go ahead and do that. This will also help me trim some of these overly long wires down that I overestimated how much wiring I was going to need. I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to trim it off. That's no big issue. So let's go ahead and glue this down. Now that I've got this part in and I know everything is square and level, I can go ahead and glue, just making sure that I don't block that channel. Alrighty, I just flipped this over onto its back and put in a fine bead of white slick, tulip slick, just through there, and smoothed it down with a moistened Q-tip and cleaned that area out. And we're going to let that cure for a while yet, whilst I am looking at just tweaking this saucer edge now that everything is down. Got these 2 lights masked off. I've got the strobe masked off, and this is the area that I need to be painting, because that's the area that's going to be toughest to get to once the gondola is in place. So I'm going to start rounding up my research. I've got plenty of really good reference pictures of the ship when it was painted up as the Pegasus. But outside of the number change and the name change, I don't think there was a significant amount of alterations done to the rest of the ship, so I'm going to count that as my reference for the hull as it looked and the paint scheme as it looked. Just brushing this off a bit. Rest assured, there are plenty of coats of white that need to go on here, whites and grays, and these will be that medium blue that is such a fun color on the, see, it's going to look something like this. See, this is my 1000 scale. I didn't glue that down so that we can see what this is going to look like. So we've got the two main areas of the medium blue, and it looks like some areas of gray here that are pretty close to this primer color. And so I think maybe what the next thing to do is to paint this white and then mask the areas that are going to stay white and paint the gray over top of that. I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Morning everybody, it's Thursday, it's the gateway to the weekend, and I've done a little work this morning. I kind of had to do some low impact work because I had my pre-summer AC inspector come by today, so I kind of had to be on the lookout for him, and therefore I wasn't going to be running out in and out doing a bunch of sanding. But I did do some necessary work this morning, and that is to significantly neaten up the wiring for what is happening inside. I shortened a lot of these wires that frankly I didn't know how long they were going to need to be, so I just cut them way too long. Well, here's just the first shortening and neatening, and I've got Elliot's board hot glued in place, and I've got the wires all bundled up to the side. One last thing I could do is to put a little bit of Velcro on these batteries and kind of Velcro those in place, but I've got the push switches rubber banded to them, and how well you can see what's going on. Let me pop that back in place. But there's the strobes and the nav lights doing their bit. Now they're covered over with a little bit of vinyl to block them right now, because the next thing to do is to take this outside and put a coat of primer over top of this area so that I can start painting. Alrighty, now the pontoon and pylons are on the porch. They are drying off, curing up. They've had a nice coat of primer. So I've primered the pontoons and the pylons. There's your P alliteration for today. So while the pontoons and the pylons are being primered on the porch, I am going to turn my attention now to getting the masking cut for this. Now there are two. Well, let me get the 1000 scale so you can see the kind of detail I'm talking about. There are the two blue shapes here, which is this and this. Then there is a gray, an amount of gray and white, basically. Now, it's a little bit more drastic on this tiny kit than it is on the filming model. It's like, you know, a 90% white and a 70% white. It's not a huge amount of difference. But, and that's the way I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to make them, you know, startlingly different. Not as high contrast as this. So what I want to do is first see if these shapes that I've cut for the small 1000 scale Grissom will in fact work on the larger scale. So I've sized them up, and I'm just going to do a blind, you know, 600% larger, and then we're going to see if those fit or if they're going to need some drastic alterations. Okay, the first thing we can tell is that the design is much longer than the, if you blow it up and just keep everything in its same position, it is a lot longer than the deck of the kit, and that means we need to push everything or squash everything up. The key thing I want to, because that's easy enough to do, what I want to do now though is the important thing, which is to check this shape against the blue indent to see how well it lines up, and we can see that it is also proportionately too long. The width is width needs adjusting, but this is what it looks like from a, wow, we're way off on a couple of these things. So what we can do is what I need to do is basically do a retracing of this shape on tape, and then scan that and adjust, lay it down to the next to the shape and then do the adjusting. But you can see that it's also proportionately way too long. And there you go. Now we've got masks. Now there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done, and that will be in the next version. But that's the gist of it. So these are now masked off, and I can paint the white around them. I think what I'd like to do, because I am desperate to get some color on this kit today, is I will go ahead and paint these blue, and then I will mask them over to protect them from the white that I am going to paint on top. No, these are masked now, so I know these masks fit. I'm going to cut another set of them, and let me do the ones on the bottom at the same time, because these shapes are identical. And I'm just going to double check their fit. And there you go. Oh, I'm seeing some. Okay, now I have adjusted these. If I were going to be making a set of these for the general public, I would go through another round of tweaking and, finessing and fine-tuning. But since these are simply for me, I'm just going to call these close enough, and then I'm going to trim them manually with an X-Acto and deal with them that way. Get that out of the way. Get that out of the way. Yeah, these are going to do fine. So let me go ahead. I think what I want to do is slap some blue paint into these impressions. See how this one's going to fit. Put some blue paint into these recesses. Let that dry. Then mask them over. Yeah, that's going to work just fine. Well, huzzah! Finally have the first real color down on the underside of the deck of the Grissom. We've got the medium blue down from Tamiya. Looking pretty good. It's hard sometimes when you've got an area this big to make sure you've got a nice even coat down. So, you might want to take a couple passes at it. But there you go. We're ready to flip this over and do the ones on the top. And I'm only doing that. I said I wasn't going to paint the top, but I'm only doing it because I've got some of this paint left in the brush, and I don't want to waste it because I'm going to be using so much of it. I know I'll have plenty of opportunities to paint with it or to get it out again. But I think what I'd like to do in this case is go ahead and take these masks off and paint in these areas that I can, that I know I'm going to be needing to paint blue anyway. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, whoop-de-doo, look at that. We got some blue on the top of the deck now as well. Of course, this is not the area that I'm most keenly interested in painting. I am most keenly interested in painting this area here. Getting all this ready so that I also need to paint the inside of the pylons. I need to paint this area, so that when I put the two things down. Now, here's something that has come up, and I will address now. The decals. I still feel that once I have the pontoon in place, I could still slide in the decals that need to go around these snowspeeder guns. I'm not worried about putting those down before I put the pylon and everything else in, because those can kind of be slid into place. It's just the painting particularly the further out you get to where the pylons are going to come, these edges here, that's where it's going to be the toughest to get paint into. This area here is still going to be fairly accessible. These areas here will be fairly accessible. You know, I can even take these off because this has had plenty of time to dry. That looks even better. So what I can do now is, after this has had a shot at drying, I can put the masks over top of that and then paint this whole deck white, and then put the white masks down, and then paint the lighter gray. Well, good morning, folks. It's Friday. It's the last work day of the week, and I'm expecting big doings today. I got an early bit of a jump. Well, yesterday I sprayed this white. Last night I sprayed the white primer on it. Today I am putting today I put down the masks that will keep the areas white that I want to keep white, and I am putting some mottled grays over top of this. I'm going to go and do some fancy schmancy stuff with plating, just by doing some carding and spraying some lines on it, just to break up this gray, because this is a big expansive area of kit here and I want to break it up a bit. And then once all that's had a chance to dry, I go back and I peel the white masks off, and that will give me a contrast to the white that's underneath there. And then you peel the blue masks off and you see that wonderful blue that's under there. And hopefully today, the goal for today is to get the pontoon attached. To do that, I need to get this plate area painted to where I'm happy with it. Not going to worry about putting the decals down, not going to worry about putting the clear coat on it. That may bite me in the rear end later on, but I think I can get away without putting the clear coat on. And then I need to do the inside bowl area of the pylons, and that's had a white coat put on it. That is also drying. If I can get the inside of the pylons done today and this deck done today, then there's nothing stopping me from putting the two together, putting the screws in it that I have the screw holes cut out for, and big old slap of putty on that and let that dry over the weekend. So, oh, we're having some fun now. I've got the metallic gray as a base for most of the top of the pontoon here, and I will be bringing some panels up in a titanium silver and a chrome silver, just a dusting over it over top to lighten that up and break up the surface a bit. I've got the again the metallic gray going on in here in the two recesses in the pylons. I've gone ahead and done a light gray here on these triangle recesses. They're not really spelled out that way as much as I can tell on the filming model. What I want to go do now is peel some of this off so I can see what I'm working with, and call out the accents that are happening inside here. And there's a framework here that the most of the inside of the pylon should be a medium gray, and then these big white panels here. So what I want to do is peel some of this stuff off, mask it off again to protect these, paint the whole thing gray, which is probably something I should have done to start with and didn't do, and then that will allow me to put the framework in and paint the white. So, okay, so I've got the gray put on the inner pylons and the grid work sprayed. While that's drying, I need to plot some really thin strips to go in there. I'm in danger of overworking this. I kind of like what's going on in the tail section here, but I don't want to overdo it. So best to put it aside for a second and go get the top deck again and do some work on it. Okay, so I've done another pass on the bottom of the top deck, and it may look a little obvious and patchy just like that, but remember, I've got a lighter blending coat that's going to go over top of all of this once these white masks come off. And there's a lot more white in here than you're seeing right now because of the tape that's covering it and the templates that are covering the white. So yeah, it looks a little too checkerboardy here, but again, this is going to be hidden underneath the pylon, so you're not going to see too much of it. Okay, this is the last bit on the inside saddle of the pylons that I need to get painted today before we do the big construction. So I'm just going to be putting some whites and some camo grays, which is a warm white, warm gray on it, to try to break up those areas. And I think that's going to help give me guidance for what the rest of the hull is going to look like. I know I didn't really need to do all of this work out here because, you know, I'm still going to have plenty of access to it. But once I got going on the metallics, I really wanted to keep up with it and make sure it was consistent with what was going on back there. And what the heck, you know, I can always paint over it. I mean, I have to do some slight panel working in here, some slight panel working back in there. And I know, let me think. Let's see, the back deck is going to come right. No, I think I'm pretty confident I can do that decking work with the plating work with that deck in place. So, one last pass of, some whites here to crisp up those lines. And, this part will be done. And while it's drying, I can finish the underside of the top deck. Once both of those are ready to go, it's going to be construction time. Okay, I'm hoping you can see this. I'm going to try spinning it around. You can see maybe some of what's happening here. I'm using the Pearl Starship White in the Mission Models line. All of the whites and grays that I've been doing have been in the Mission Models line. All of the blues and the metallics I've been doing have been Tamiya's. They seem to play well together, but that's going to help inform me about what a lot of the hull is going to look like. This is a camo gray with a little bit of white on, you know, sprinkled over it, and then this pearl that's just shining up depending on how the light hits it, which is exactly the look I was going for. Now, I've got some color change floppy colors, but I don't want to use that on this ship because that's not really how the Grissom was painted. That's, you know, strictly refit stuff, so I'm not going to get into that. But I like how this is broken up now, so I'm going to take all the masking off and see if I'm happy with it. And if I am, I'm going to put it to the side, do one last pass on the underside of the deck, and we'll be ready to slap these two pieces together. Okay, now on camera this looks like more like a symphony of grays than it does in real life. I'm not wild about this. I wanted this to stand out, and I accidentally painted it the same color as everything else. So I think I'm going to find a nice medium gray that's a little bit darker than the framework, but not nearly as dark as the metallic gray, and just paint that in. I don't want to do it in the blue because that's too drastic. The small kit doesn't have the area painted in at all, but I feel that it needs something. Plus, we've got a blue stripe going here for the leading edge of the pylon, so I don't want to make that. Certainly, don't want to make that blue. I'm trying to envision what it would look like, one or two shades darker, and I think if I darkened it up some, that would actually have the effect of lightening some of this. So I'm going to mix up a little bit darker color of gray and hit those two triangles. Okay, back on the bottom now, and I think I'm ready to remove all of these white templates, and then we'll do an overall white blending coat. So let me get all this tape off and expose the bare white that I had this morning, and we'll see how much blending there needs to have happen. I can already tell this white is awfully stark and contrasty. Part of that is on purpose, though, I have to admit. Now, I'm not worried about doing any painting out here on the saucer until I am well along the way of... That'll happen next week after I have attached the top of the saucer and all of that. But for right now, I just need to, and I'm going to leave these blue masks in place as well. Let's go ahead and take this is going to look gray because this never got any white paint on it. That's the area where the pylons are going to attach. That's been protected since practically day one, so let me get the tape all of this off. Yeah, I didn't think there's any sense putting any paint down on this area since that's where the pylons attach. Okay, let's get some of these white masks off and see how they look. I can attest to the fact that there will be some blending that needs to have happen. This area here has to be better defined. Alrighty, this is what it looks like with the masks removed. You can see that white is very bright. It's doing almost exactly what I want it to do, but you can definitely see where some lines need to be cleaned up. And the lines that most need cleaned up is this one here, and it needs to come in at a definite angle, and then to here. And now I don't have a problem with the straight line from the front coming back to here, but it really should come inside of all of those divots on the gun. So it should look something like that. So all of this area needs to be painted white. And then I need to do this, and this should be a straight angle. And then there should be a, I'll draw it on with a pencil here first. If I can find my pencil, where'd my pencil go? You can see where I need to draw in this line here. And then paint white up into it. So I'm just going to mask that off from the other side, and then I'm going to respray the white on here before we put the white all over everything, or the white and the Starship pearl white. Okay, so I have just sprayed some white over top of that to reinforce these lines. I may give it a few minutes and then give it one more pass. This is white Tamiya, and it can be finicky, so just sharpening up those lines. That is this area on the smaller ship. It is this white strip that goes down the center. And then I'll go in and break this whole thing up with some a lighter coat of the Starship pearl white, and maybe a touch of the camo gray, just to lighten this whole thing up, because I feel it's all still kind of dark, but an overall blending coat will take care of that. I am working on the mechanical connection between the pylon and the deck, the main deck, and what we start with is a hole we drill straight through, well, at an angle, and then this little mojama, which is a countersink cutting bit, so that when I put the screw in, the top of it will be slightly recessed here. Now I'm going to cover that over with putty and hopefully disguise it, but that's going to give me my mechanical connection. That plus the epoxy going in the joint between that and the deck hopefully will be enough to keep those together forever. So all I need to do now is drill the countersink cuts on this pylon, and we will be dangerously close to sinking these two things together. Alrighty, I just had to tweak this white edge just a tiny bit to line it up with the other one, and very happy with how that's looking. So one quick, well, let this dry for a second or two, and then start doing a lighter pass over it with the, if you find it here, not the light gray, not the light gray. It is the Pearl Starship white, and I'm going to mix it with a little of the regular white. These are the Mission Models colors. Give it a misting over top of all of that. I've got the pylons in the other room with the big holes you saw me drill in. And then I'm getting ready to sink these screws in. So I think what I'll do is I'll butter this area here with a 15-minute epoxy, something really slow acting, because I don't want it to accidentally set up while I am doing something else. And then once everything is down, I will tape it, nail it, rubber band it, do whatever I have to let it sit. And then that will be it for the week. Okay, here is the color reference that I'm using now. This is taken from, I believe, the Christie's auction. It's got the Pegasus markings on it, but you know, 90% of the detail is still there from Grissom. And you can see the silver grayish lower saucer here. Same thing over there. The blue that's in the main holes here. You can see the remnants of the decals. And then here are those whiter shapes that you saw me putting on. And then you have just a, you know, grayed out area where you have a lot of mottled grays and whites there. And that's what's going to be my inspiration, or what has been my inspiration for the bottom. And of course you see this blue stripe with the black shaped black rectangles in there that are not, they're not recessed like the kit had, so I had to fill those in. Here you can see the silver with the overall silver with some of the plating that I'll be putting in. The decals are what's kind of got my head scratching about how well those are going to go on. Here you have the dark blue only in the top one. These two aren't colored at all. This is mostly that camo gray / white with a grayish trim around it, mirroring what's going on the inside. So when it comes time to paint those, I'll be looking at that. Right about here is where my screw heads are going, there, and there. So I'll have to cover those over. You have the complete thickness of the top deck going around here, and then the pylons actually start down here. So that's going to be an interesting bit of cleanup and puttying to do. Okay, hopefully you can remember what this used to look like, and now you can see that it's much more pale, much more blended, not nearly as dark and contrasty as it was. We're going to let this dry for, oh, I don't know, what time is it? It's getting later. Give it about half an hour, and then we're going to start doing the grand construction. Ooh, hold on to your hats, kids. Okay, I have test fitted and test screwed. And if you've ever been test screwed, you know exactly how painful that can be. I was test screwed the pylon in here. Wanted to make sure that my holes that I had drilled into the top deck were not too shallow. These all line up. Everything looks good. So I'm going to unscrew this, lay a bead of epoxy in there, and then re-screw it, and then go to the other side, I guess. But that went in kind of painlessly, and I'm either getting better at what I'm doing or something horrible is about to happen. So I hope it's the former and not the latter. Okay, this is it. I have tested both sides. I have pulled the wires down through or up through, depending on your orientation. I tested all of these screws. What I need to do now is just lift this up a little bit, butter some epoxy in there, set it back down, and then put the screws in, turn it around, lift it up, butter the joint with some epoxy, set it back down, and put the screws in. So if I don't come back, you'll know it didn't go very well, but I have a feeling it's going to go just fine. So what I need to do at this point is just whip up a little bit of the slow acting epoxy. Okay, that may look very sloppy, but I'm happy as heck with it. Now, yes, I'm going to have to use Bondo to cover over these screw heads, and I will probably use the actual body putty, not the spot filler, just to throw a bead in here to fill out that gap, plus it'll also reinforce and glue and all that kind of stuff, and I'll cover the screw heads at the same time with it. And that I might do over the weekend, because I want to be able to hit the ground running on Monday. And if I use that, I want to give it at least a day to dry. So I will hit those seams on both sides over the weekend. But look at that. Yes, the stand is finally coming in handy. Yes, it's upside down. I know it's upside down. Let me see if I can flip it over. I've got some epoxy on my hands yet, so I need to go wash first. Okay, this is me just piecing everything together. Not glued down, not glued down, not glued down. But you're finally getting a look at what the whole beastie looks like on the table. On the stand all together in one time for the first time. And the little baby one to go right on top of it. But it's starting to get there. And you really don't appreciate the length of that boom, the pontoon, until you get to the back of it here. If you catch it from the wrong view, it looks all kind of squat and stubby. But there you go. Oh, that's a good amount of work for 1 week. And that's going to do it for this week. How do you like the new Aztek dummy shirts? These are the shirts I had done up for Wonderfest. You're going to see me in these a lot, because I got 10 of them made up. So, you know, I have some that I could sacrifice to the paint gods, and one that I put away and keep nice. But if you see me wearing the same shirt day after day after day, it may not be the same shirt. It may just be one of the many ones of this. Sort of like Charlie Brown, only has the one shirt, but he's got like 20 of them. This is going to be probably the new uniform. But that's going to do it for this week. I've got the big construction done. Got some paint on it finally. Got the big halves put together. And now all I got to do is everything else that's left. The nacelles are a job by themselves. That front saucer is a job to itself. I have to do something about those little hanger bays. That's going to be fun. And then I've got the whole outside of the bottom that I didn't even touch. So until next week, when we'll be back at it, hope you had a good week. I will see you here next time. So until then, be good. Be good to each other. Be good to yourself. Get outside and play. And we'll see you here next week.